everyone. It's good to be here at UJ and to chat to you. We're 15 minutes late, so I'm taking 15 minutes more over the schedule. And I'll try and leave some time for questions at the end, if you have any. So just jot them down and we can have a chat. I'm here to talk to you about reinvention and change, which is, I think, something I'm not actually sure that South Africans really need that topic to be spoken about, because we have to do that on a daily basis in this country. You open a newspaper or turn on the television and there's some new drama happening. And I think that's become a global phenomenon as well at the moment, is that the world is changing at such a rapid rate. And I don't even mean technologically, but I think just politically. The things that we've known as sort of steadfast ways of operating are no longer the ways of operating. People are not playing by the rules that have been established for good. I'm talking about accountability, just being a decent human being. Nobody is playing by those rules anymore. And so that actually means that we have to sort of relook at how we operate in the world. I was watching a documentary this weekend, and I would really urge you to watch it. It's called Get Me Roger Stone, and it's about the person who was behind Donald Trump's rise in the United States. And it's a really fascinating, horrifying look at how he got there, but also about this group of people around him who, literally just never plays by the rules. And unfortunately, if we're to understand the new world, it's not business as usual anymore. So reinvention and change is, I think, part of our common daily experience at the moment. And all I can really offer is to talk from my own personal experience. You know me probably because I was a journalist in South Africa for a long time. First I worked at Radio 702, and then I was at Third Degree and ran a show called I was at Third Degree, I was at ENCA, and I ran a show called Third Degree, and I was the editor-in-chief of the newsroom. And Third Degree had a reputation for being, quite hard-hitting, asking tough questions, and holding those in power to account. And that's really where I suppose I gained my reputation as a journalist during that period. And then 4 years ago, in 2013, actually almost to the day, around about May the 11th, I decided to leave Third Degree and step out into the big wide world. And everyone thought I was insane, because I had this great job, I was famous, I had massive success. Third Degree was the top-rated current affairs show in the country, and I'm not saying this to boast, I'm saying this to show you how hard it was to leave. We were at the top of our game. There was nothing close to us competitively in terms of audience ratings, which is what television measures audience viewership with. And we had an incredibly solid reputation. We could phone up people. We didn't have to give an intro. I'm from Third Degree. Everyone knows what Third Degree is. If you came on the show and expected to have an easy time, then you must have been pretty stupid, or out of the country for 20 years. Everybody knew what our style was. Everybody knew what we did. It didn't need much explanation. And so we had this reputation and this brand that had become entrenched in South Africa and part of South African journalism. So with this huge success and things still bubbling in South Africa, I mean, the Zuma presidency was just getting going for a second term, and there were many, many issues that needed exploration and investigation. So from a journalist point of view, I mean, South Africa is gold. It really is. It's political gold for a journalist. There are so many stories here all the time. And I decided to leave. And people thought I was crazy. In fact, they thought I was so crazy that they were writing articles like, is there some sinister agenda? Is she getting fired? Did she have a fight with someone about the way a story is being done? And there really was nothing like that at all. It was just, I had decided that I'd got to a certain point, and my biggest fear was that, I didn't want, you know that feeling, and I'd say this with love and affection because I think Carte Blanche is a great program, but you know that feeling on Sunday when you hear the Carte Blanche music and you think, oh God, it's the end of the weekend, you know? And then you look at the presenters and you think, wow, some of them have been there a while. I didn't want to get like that where people thought, oh my God, she's still there, still chasing after crooks and doing their thing. And so I think part of the problem with major success is that it actually breeds mediocrity. And that was starting to happen to me, and I don't think it was evident externally. We still put out an exceptionally good show. I had a fantastic team working with me. But I knew how to do it, you know. Whereas in the very beginning, I would take days to prepare for an interview. I could do that within a couple of hours now, you know, and particularly if it was an issue that I knew well. I knew enough background research. I mean, we always role-played interviews, and that didn't stop, but it was a lot easier. You know, I could sort of go in and it wasn't sort of the same intensity of work. And we had a style and we had a format, and people didn't really want us to change from that format. So if there was going to be any change, it couldn't be within that parameter. You know, third degree was its thing, and I needed to do something different. And so that's why I left. And I think that's the first learning about reinvention, is that when you are at the peak of your success, that's the time to move on. And I really, really believe that. Because if you think about people who haven't, what do you remember? You remember them not being so successful. I mean, I think Steffi Graf is an incredibly good example of someone who is at the top of her game in tennis, and that's when she left. She was so good that even when she left, she was still high in the rankings, even though she wasn't playing any games, because her skills were so incredible. She actually had to ask the tennis league to take her off altogether and lose all those points. I mean, that's how you want to be remembered. Nelson Mandela left after one term in office. And to this day, whatever criticisms one has about the way the ANC conducted themselves in the first 5 years of a democratic South Africa, he is revered as being a man of integrity and a man who knew when to step down. Look just across the border at our neighbor in Zimbabwe, there is a man who seriously doesn't know when his time to go has come. I mean, it was a good, you know, probably 15, 20 years ago that he should have stepped down, notwithstanding the fact that it's undemocratic. You know, he's too old, he's too stuck in another world to actually see what that country needs. And as a result, Zimbabwe has sunk. I mean, there's all sorts of political reasons, I'm fully aware of that, but there is something to be said for not staying out your welcome and to go when you're at the top of the game. And for me, it's been interesting because, you know, I've sort of developed a whole new area in journalism, but everywhere I go in South Africa, still to this day, people come up to me and they recognize me and they want to talk to me and they remember third degree. Sometimes they even think third degree is still going, which is a little alarming. Shows how often they actually watch the show. But the point is that if you have a good legacy, it remains. You know, leaving doesn't destroy it. Actually, in some ways, it preserves it. And then you can go on to do something else. But you have to, and I can't underscore this enough, you have to leave when you're at the top, not just after, because you don't want to be pushed out, you don't want people to be thinking, God, it's time for her to go. You want to leave on your own terms, because then you can define the future. Now, when I left third degree, I didn't have a plan. Like, I had a sort of a plan. I'm not one of those people who has 5-year plans. I think that's just rubbish, and anyone who does that, honestly, don't. It's pointless. Because when you do that, you close so many doors to yourself. And no one can live by a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. And what happens when you don't achieve that 5-year plan? You feel like a failure, but maybe actually you're doing something better. Or maybe you're on a path that's pretty good. Sure, I have goals. I kind of broadly want to do this. But don't set yourself those ridiculous time limits, which are getting, you know, smaller and smaller as the world gets more and more advanced. And sort of 16-year-olds have unlimited success on YouTube or something, and we feel this pressure to be successful before we've even left school these days. Don't set yourself those kind of goals. So I didn't really have a plan. I had options, so I wasn't stupid. I have 2 children in private school. I have a hectic bond to pay. I had debts. I knew that I could manage for about 6 months without having a job, But I also had options. I had a few sort of part-time contracts, and I was going to mainly work for Channel 4, which is a British television station, and CBS, which is an American TV station. My overall plan was that I wanted to make it internationally. I wanted to start working internationally. I didn't want to be an anchor. I liked being a journalist. I wanted to go back to doing what I just love doing, which is journalism. You know, it's really the only thing I'm good at, that and cooking. I'm a very good cook. It's a fact you don't know about me. So I decided that, I just sort of put my toe out there. Unfortunately, I knew that Mandela wasn't well, and that, that would probably be one of the last big international stories in South Africa of any interest to the globe. And then Oscar Pistorius went and shot his girlfriend and became the second most well-known person from this country after Nelson Mandela in all the wrong ways. And so those sort of two stories kept me working very hard, actually. I actually didn't have time to breathe. And then slowly I started making a mark at CBS. But it took me a while. It took me 3 years, really. Before, I worked non-stop for them, but I only got a full-time job with them last year in August, because getting a full-time job at CBS is almost impossible. There's only 6 of us, 6 foreign correspondents globally. And we travel around the world, you don't have to be based. In fact, none of them are based in America. They're mainly based in London or elsewhere. And we travel and we cover everything from Syria, Iraq, to Africa, to whatever the story is, whatever the big global story is. But getting there was really hard. So part of reinvention, if you're going to do that, is you might have to start at the bottom again. Now, that was a humbling experience for me. I was at the top. I was famous, I was really good, and there were times I was like, don't you know who I am? I've been doing this I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for a long time. Nobody had the faintest idea who I was in America. But it actually was such a liberating experience because I could just do pure journalism. I didn't have to worry about what the viewers thought. I didn't even meet the viewers because I don't live in the States. I just put my stories out into the black hole of journalism, and the only worry that I had was that my bosses would like the piece. That was actually the only, that I actually did a good job as a journalist, which kind of freed me up to just really work very hard and do my very best. But that is the second thing about reinvention. The first is that success can breed mediocrity because you get into a comfort zone. The second is that you may have to start at the bottom again. But it's not totally at the bottom again. It's that you're just starting in a bigger fish pond, I suppose, in a way. And you have to be humble. You have to say, okay, they don't know that I know that, and I'm not going to boast that I do. Let me learn, because there is something I can learn. And really, for me, the leap between local television and international, and that's not to knock local TV, because I think we have very, very good journalists in South Africa, and we put out good products in some areas of the media. I think there's some that need a lot of work. But it was like going from home movies to Spielberg, because the level of professionalism was that much higher. The demands, if you want to get a story on air, you have to jump through first like a million hoops. The first big story I did for them internationally was actually Nelson Mandela, and the first big story I broke for them was Mandela's ambulance breaking down. I don't know if you remember, it broke down, charming, really. And to get that story on air, they sat on it for a week. It would have gone on air the first day in South Africa. And it was right, though, because they didn't know me. I was an unknown quantity, but they also have higher standards for proving a story. So even though I had 2 sources, they were like, no, you need a third. And you actually need to get comment from his, like a Mac Maharaj or whoever the case may be, because you need to make sure that this is watertight. You don't want to get this thing wrong. Eventually we went to air. But I never experienced that in my life. I've just done a huge investigation for them. And I had to sit down with legal. And it was like a bloodbath, honestly. It really was. The stuff that we had to go through and the questions. I felt I was on trial, for doing my story, but it was very good. So the learnings have been incredible. And I think if you humble yourself, you can actually learn an incredible amount. But I think perhaps the hardest thing about stepping out, and you can say, oh yeah, but you were well known, you had this, that. Honestly, I can tell you in an American context, I was just nothing. I mean, America's a huge country, and CBS is a global brand. I mean, 60 Minutes is the best current affairs show in the world. So to even just get a toe in the door there is really, really hard. And there are thousands of people competing globally to try and do that kind of thing. So, all the old basics don't go away of when you're reinventing yourself, is that you still have to work hard. There's no shortcuts. You have to work hard and be professional. I mean, I think I work harder than I've ever worked in my life. I mean, I should be like sitting back and having minions to do the job for me. I mean, we went to Syria, we covered the fall of Aleppo last year. And I mean, literally, it was like up at 5, and because of the terrible time differences wherever we are in the world, it's like you have 3 hours sleep every night for a month, because that's the story. And then you get a good break afterwards. But the thing is, you're still working hard. There's no one to do it for you. There are no shortcuts. There are never any shortcuts. And that's the thing. That's why you leave when you're successful, because that's when you start taking the shortcuts. That's when you abuse your success or your power, or whatever the case may be. That's why you constantly need that challenge of refreshment and reinvigoration. And the challenge of when you're starting out and you're impressing people because wow, that kind of thing. It's a very good feeling to keep having that at different stages in your career, which is why I would advise that kind of thing. But I suppose the hardest thing is that you need courage, and courage is a very difficult thing to talk about. When I was a very young journalist, which was a very long time ago now, I was very privileged because I was given the job of following Nelson Mandela around the country after he'd been released from jail and when he was campaigning to be president of this country. I was a radio journalist then for 702, so there was the radio equipment, which was like gigantic in those days. I think it's on your phone probably now, and my cell phone, because cell phones had just come to South Africa. We were like over the moon. It was so exciting. They were about this big, and you could like kill someone with them. Literally, it was like a dangerous weapon. You could like knock someone out. They were so heavy. So I had these things way down, and I would follow Nelson Mandela. I was kind of like his shadow. And it was an amazing experience because I got to see up close and personal this man that was revered and adored by so many and hated and vilified by others. But this was before everyone loved Mandela. I was kind of part of introducing him to people in South Africa who were maybe a little bit skeptical. And we were flying one day from Johannesburg to KwaZulu-Natal. And for those of you old enough to remember, and those of you who've studied history and remember, at that time, Carter and the ANC were engaged in a lot of conflict, which was dubbed black on black violence, but we now know was fueled by a white apartheid third force. And Mandela was going to address a rally in KZN, which was a peace rally and pretty dangerous at the time. So he flew in a helicopter, and it was a very prestigious group of people in that aircraft, with the exception of myself. It was Nelson Mandela, it was Chris Hani, who was still alive at the time, Cyril Ramaphosa, now Deputy President, then heading up negotiations in the country, and Jay Naidu, who was the head of COSATU in those days, and Mandela's biographer. So off we flew, and the pilot indulged in an activity that pilots should never indulge in, which is oversharing. And he told us that one of the engine things had failed. So I'm like, okay, so what do I do with that information? But we could still fly, but we should just be aware. I mean, I said I was like ashen. Madiba sat there the entire time, the corners of his mouth turned down, when he's not smiling. Impassive, he didn't say a word, just read his paper. We landed. I'm, ashen. Chris Hani's throwing up in the bushes, brave freedom fighter that he was. We were all throwing up. Madiba hops off the plane. He was still hopping in those days. And then he turns to me and he says, "Man, I was terrified." But you didn't show it. And he said, "Aha, you see, Debora, courage is not the absence of fear. It's how you choose to deal with the fear." And that really is the point, is that don't think you won't be scared. when you change is scary. You know, I don't even like my routine to be changed, and I'm a journalist who has no routine, who could literally get a call from my boss now, get on a plane and get to Iraq. And yet, you know, so I live in that constant stage, but I'm not naturally like that. I travel around the world with my Nespresso machine, because every good day needs to begin with a good cup of coffee, is my philosophy, even in a war zone. And that just centers me, because it kind of feels a bit like, you know, home, that I've got a good, you know, espresso in the mornings. And believe you me, I make many friends that way, because they're all lining up my door for them. But the thing is that, you know, you will feel scared. And there were many times in Nelson Mandela's life that he was terrified. He was terrified when he was standing trial for treason that he would be executed. He was terrified when eventually it was commuted to a jail term, that he would not withstand the beatings of the warders. And he was terrified when he began the negotiations for our first all-race election, while still inside prison, without the knowledge of everyone in the ANC, that it would somehow leak and he would be regarded as a sellout and it would cause, you know, chaos. And he told me, when Chris Hani was assassinated sometime later, that he was terrified then that the country would spiral into bloody violence. So it wasn't that he lived without fear. And the way he did it, he said to me, was that he pretended to be brave. And the more you pretend to be brave, the braver you become. And think about it, it's really true. I mean, people say, oh, you're so brave. I'm really not. I'm actually kind of stupid. I run after people down dark alleys who are crooks, who have murdered people. That is not a bright thing to do, you know, but you do one step at a time, pretending to be brave. The most recent example for me was in 2014 when, you know, I was like now trying to make it at CBS, and they were like, well, Ebola's broken out, would you like to go and cover it? I'm like, well, not really, but didn't feel like I could say no, because this was like the biggest story in the world, and this was a huge opportunity for me. But there were two problems, Ebola being the first, and the second being that I'm highly claustrophobic. I actually don't know why I'm a journalist. I'm such a mess, you know, in so many areas. I'm really not a brave person. I'm so claustrophobic, and all I could think of was, I'm not going to cope in that hazmat suit. And, you know, the hazmat suit is a terrible, terrible thing. The surgeons who were in it, or the doctors, I mean, they would like sweat 2 liters of water in their boots when they came out, when you can't stay in it for longer than 45 minutes, and it's hot. Liberia and Sierra Leone are not cold countries. Anyway, I said fine, and I then did what I'm very good at, is just researched, you know, the thing to death, knew everything, spoke to experts. And the one thing about CBS is that they set the bar high, but they always have your back. So they sent a virologist with us to say, don't touch that, stick your hazmat suit on now. We had 5 hazmat suits a day, and I mean, we took all the precautions. And I started to learn about the virus, and actually learned, on one level it's easy to spread, but on another level it's actually not. And if you take the right precautions, one of them just being washing your hands regularly and not touching people, and constantly being sprayed down with chlorine. I mean, I stank of the stuff afterwards. Actually, you managed quite well. But what I also learned was that it was the fear of the unknown that was more paralyzing than being there. Because I was terrified in the run-up. But once I actually got there, we went to Liberia. Once I got to Liberia and started traveling around and doing the story and adjusting to, it's really horrible because you have to interview people at a distance. And, you know, because you can't get close, you don't want to touch and whatever. And it's not very good for compassion or empathy when you have to shout the questions of the poor person. So, you know, those kind of things were awkward. But it wasn't that scary. Actually, Liberia is an amazing place, and it was one of the best experiences I've ever had as a journalist. And it was a profound lesson for me, because it was again a reminder that we're not naturally courageous. We're fearful, and that's okay. We need to acknowledge the fear. It's when you acknowledge the fear that you then can move on from that. And then it's baby steps. You pretend to be brave. You take one step, and then soon it becomes a lot easier. Ebola looks like it might have broken again in DRC, and I feel quite comfortable to go and cover it. I know how to deal with it now. You know, it was the same covering the Syrian war, and I've been on several occasions now, but the first time I didn't quite know what to expect. I hadn't been to Syria before, I'd been to Iraq, but I didn't know what it looked like, and nothing can really prepare you for actually how unbearably horrific that place is. But it was the fear of not knowing, and once I got there and I could see, okay, this is where you hide, this is where you run, this is what you do when they attack your hotel, this is when the mortars come, this is where you don't go at night, or whatever the case may be, and you know, you're working with good people. It's kind of calming. And think about that in your own lives. You're scared sometimes of something you don't know, right? Because you don't know I didn't know when I left third degree if things would work out. But I was going to do my damnedest to try and make sure that it would. So fear shouldn't paralyze you. Just breathe and say to yourself, okay, it's because I don't know what's going to happen. So baby steps. What makes me as a person calm down? For me, it's knowledge. When I'm armed with knowledge, I feel more equipped to deal with the thing. I started to understand this is how the virus works. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. Spoke to other journalists who went to Syria. This is what you do, this is what you don't do. We went to South Sudan, another hectic place. I mean, really worse than Syria, if you can imagine. And spoke to other journalists. And now when journalists phone me about South Sudan, I mean, I'm happy to give them the information because I think as colleagues, you're not giving anything to the competition, you're just helping another colleague with something. So I think that those things are really, really critical when you're looking at reinvention. I think the next thing around that is that don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I'm going to reinvent myself, I'm total change. No. I mean, I knew I still wanted to be a journalist. Okay, I wasn't having a complete career change. And the basic skills that I've learned as a journalist are still there and very useful. Just honed better and better. I am better. God, we should hope so after 20 years, that I should be better at what I'm doing. And I'm able to put those skills to good use at CBS. I'm good at investigating, for example. I'm good at detail in stories. I'm good at, a number of things. The other things I'm not so good at. Either I've had to learn or find somebody who is good, who's able to assist me, who's able to challenge me. Those base skills don't go away. I mean, one of the other big stories we had to do fairly soon on was the Boko Haram, when they kidnapped those over 200 schoolgirls on the eve of their final exam over 3 years ago. They've just found some of them 3 years later. I mean, it's a shocking story. And I hadn't done any work in Nigeria, really. It hadn't been a story that we'd covered much once. So I had no contacts there, and I literally had to start from the bottom. But I'm like, how would I approach the story? I don't know anybody. Let me phone a Nigerian friend. Who do you know? I phone that one. Who do you know? You know what I mean? And now I've got a whole 40, 50 good contacts in Nigeria that if anything broke there, I can phone. You build on those bases. So the basic skills don't go away. I told you we just did a big investigation now in India on a huge story that we're going to break. It's an American story around Trump, and I can't tell you about it yet. But the point is that we spent a lot of time kind of investigating, like 4 months actually, and those skills are not skills that I learned now. They're skills that I knew from ages ago. I'm just applying them to a different area. And that was part of the reason I wanted to leave. I'm like, I should be a good journalist in South Africa. I've lived in this country most of my life. I know this country. I know everybody. They know me. It's kind of easy, Can I do it in a country where nobody knows me, where I don't understand the rules and the laws and whatever the case may be? Can I, because the basic journalism skills are 100% the same. You're just applying them to a different country. So that's, again, a thing about reinvention, is all the skills you've learned to get you to where you are now don't go away. You'll just apply them differently. I think that's, something really important to remember. 2 more points before I open this up for questions. I think when you are reinventing yourself, and kind of moving with changes, moving with time and all that kind of thing, and you have to constantly be upskilling yourself as well. And these days with YouTube and the internet, you can literally learn anything yourself. You actually don't need people. I mean, I watch my 11-year-old. They don't, if I buy her a present abroad, she doesn't want the instruction manual. She'll just go online and they'll say, do this, do that, whatever she wants to teach. Sometimes I ask her something, I say, how do you know that? And she said, no, I just looked online. So you can upskill all the time, but there are moments when you need to do things a bit differently, and because that's the purpose of reinvention, right? Be lateral. I mean, look, think of Nelson Mandela. You know, he was, for some people, a terrorist. You know, this sort of freedom fighter for others, terrorist for some. But his biggest rebranding and reinvention had to be changing from a freedom fighter and a prisoner, an apartheid prisoner, to being a president. A move that, unfortunately, not everyone in government has adapted to particularly well. And that was the single biggest challenge. And part of that was to be a president for everybody. In a country that was fractured by racial discontent and racial issues. And I think, you know, in our haste to move on in this country, we forget how difficult things were. I mean, there was a race war going on in this country. There were right-wing Afrikaners who were plotting to kill Nelson Mandela. I mean, that plot, you know, became well known some time ago. So this was a really hard country that he was coming into. People hated him, including some of his own bodyguards that he'd inherited from the apartheid era. So this was a really, really difficult situation. And he was like, well, what can I do to sort of unify the country? And he thought, okay, you know, being Mandela, let me choose the hardest possible thing, rugby. Now, I mean, just focus on that for a second. I'm not a sports person, and I hate rugby. I must be honest. I'm Italian. You know, we like soccer. I don't understand this picking up a ball and run with the business and jumping into some thing, people kicking each other, whatever they do in the scrum. Rugby, okay? A sport which 80% of this country not only didn't necessarily understand, but despised. Despised. Because probably if you were black or progressive, after, you know, the apartheid anthem and the flag, the most reviled symbol of apartheid was the Springbok rugby emblem. I mean, that's how bad it was. If you were black or progressive, you cheered for the All Blacks against your own team, you know, in those days. But no. Madiba was going to unite the country around rugby. So he called Francois Pienaar, this big, blonde, burly son of apartheid, to the union buildings and said, Francois, I want you to win the World Cup. Now, we hadn't played international rugby for a while. He was like, oh, okay, I'm not really sure I'm going to do it, but like everyone, his legs turned to jelly in the presence of greatness, and off he went. And something interesting started to happen. We started to win. It's kind of cool, right? 1995, 22 years ago. We started to win, and amazingly, Mandela then had to sort of convince his own people, the ANC, that this was a good way to go. And he stood up in a room much like this and, you know, said whatever about the rugby, and they booed him. He was booed by his own people. But, you know, he was a visionary, and he had a lateral idea, and he said, let's just go with it. We're going to do this. And amazingly, miraculously, we found ourselves in the Rugby World Cup final. Was anyone there on that day, in that stadium? Okay, so Mandela arrives, and the stadium is still, I would say, 95% white. I mean, there were very few black people there. And he walks in wearing the Springbok rugby jersey, this reviled symbol of apartheid. And as he walks into that stadium, wearing the symbol that people spat on, that they hated, there was dead silence in that stadium. Dead silence. And then slowly the crowd started chanting, Nelson, Nelson, and it got louder and louder and louder, and it still gives me gooseflesh to think about it. But we had one problem. We actually had to win the game against the All Blacks. And I know why Clint Eastwood wanted to make a movie, because he couldn't have choreographed a better ending right until that last drop kick by the only Jewish member of the squad, Joel Strunsky. And then when Madiba came out, still wearing his Springbok rugby jersey, to hand the Ellis Webb trophy over to Francois Pienaar, as he did, he said, "Francois, thank you for what you have done for this country." And with great presence of mind, Francois Pienaar quickly retorted and said, "No, Mr. President, thank you." And in that moment, a nation was born. And sure, we've gone through many problems in this country, many, many problems. But that moment, that singular moment, was built on a man who was able to transform himself from freedom fighter, political prisoner, to president of all South Africa. And that really is the purpose of reinvention. It is to be better. So when you are about to reinvent, you need to have a long, hard look. What is it that I didn't like about the way I behaved or operated or did in my previous iteration? What was it about the way I managed people at third degree, or the way I did journalism sometimes, whatever? Those are the things you want to change or not repeat again. Because there's no point going forward and being the same person. You need to be a bit, that is the purpose of reinvention, is to be better, to learn the lessons of whatever it is you've been doing. But through it all, having core principles. The core principles can't change. Whatever your core principles are, goodness, decency, I hope are amongst them, because those are values that are very lost in leadership these days. Those core principles need to remain the same. And that is what Nelson Mandela did. Those core principles remain the same, regardless of whether he was fighting against apartheid, in jail, or president of the country. And I'm going to end with 2 short stories about that. Before he became president, the ANC bought him a house in Houghton, which was kind of a whites-only suburb in those days, because they wanted him to have a place where he could meet foreign dignitaries who were obviously come pouring in to see him. So they bought him this house. He moved in, Houghton, big properties, and he decided, well, in accordance with African tradition, he wasn't going to stand on ceremony. He was going to go and introduce himself to his neighbors. And he wasn't going to phone and say, "Hey, I'm coming." He was just going to rock up. So he decided to walk. And they're big properties, so it's quite a long walk to the next house. So he arrives, flanked by his bodyguards, and they were still ANC at those days, so they were all black. And they ring the bell, and the housewife looks out, and what does she see? This big black mass. And what does she do? She calls ADT security. And they come screeching to a halt, only to find Nelson Mandela bearing a chocolate cake. On another occasion, we're driving back from Pretoria, and it's pouring with rain. It's one of those horrible Gauteng days, and this car's broken on the side of the road, and Mandela sees this young woman, and her tire's flat, and she can't fix it, and he's like, I'm surrounded by an army of strapping young men. He's now president, black and white, all his bodyguards. Let's help her. So he sends the order back, "Gents, we're going to stop." And they're like, "Actually, no, Mr. President, you know the rules. No unplanned stops." I mean, it's true. You could have got ambushed. Those were the rules. And if you're bodyguarding Mandela, it was a bit of a nightmare. He wants to go to, Killarney Mall and buy chocolates for Grasser. There are children there. He kind of likes the kids. And he doesn't even mind the journalists. Let's give them a soundbite too. Before long, chaos. So they said, "No, you can't." He said, "Look, I'm the president. We're going to." Can you imagine that woman's surprise when this elderly black man in a black coat with a black umbrella gets out and said, "May I help you?" And that happened every day, in front of and behind the cameras, because that was Mandela's core principle. Just as he believed that you must pretend, that the more you pretend to be brave, the braver you become, so too did he believe that the more decent you are to people, you will get decency in return. That when you appeal to better angels within people, when you appeal to people's better angels, you inspire goodness. That treating people with dignity and respect and goodness and decency are far more powerful than any weapons. And that core principle remained with him throughout. So reinvention, change, be different, be brave, be bold, take risks, but keep those core principles the same throughout. Thank you.